Ja, goedemiddag allemaal. Hartelijk welkom bij weer een BPUG webinar. BPUG webinar wat we, ja, het is toch wel weer even raar. We zijn gestart met vorige 2 weken geleden met het seminar. We kwamen weer fysiek bij elkaar. En wat je nu ziet is van, hey, we gaan weer een webinar doen. Dus ook voor mij is het weer even wennen, even schakelen hoe we dit gaan doen. Maar welkom dat jullie erbij zijn. Leuk dat jullie meekijken en luisteren. Ja, we hebben een aantal van deze sessies gepland. En ook het najaar gaat erover van hoe gaan we die combinatie doen tussen webinars en lokale events. De agenda op www.bpug.nl heeft 2 sessies nu gepland. Eén rond projectpolitiek, die we bij KWD, een van onze sponsors, mogen doen. Op, ik meen, 27 oktober. En op 18 november doen we er één bij Adapt Innovatie over modern projectmanagement. Het zijn beide fysieke sessies. Waar we mee aan de slag gaan. En nu hebben we nog een sessie in het ouderwets vertrouwde, coronapandemie webinar events. We hebben Allan Thomson van Axelos PeopleCert aan de andere kant van de oceaan. Die ons mee gaat nemen in wat PeopleCert en Axelos doen op het gebied van ProPath, hun ontwikkelschema. En hij gaat in specifiek op het thema servant leadership. So Allan, welcome. Welcome to this webinar.
And thank you, Ruud, and thank you to everybody as well. And welcome to today's webinar. And before we get started in the detail, I'll just give you a bit of background about myself. Before the year 2000, before I got involved in programs and projects, etc., I was heavily involved in process design. And at both Nissan and Toyota, I basically got involved in lean design and Kanban process controls. And at Toyota, basically, I gained the award of lean design practitioner. I've got over 25 years project and program experience, and I've been with Axelos now just for over 7 years. And since I believe the best practice supports both the PPM function and the organization as a whole, I wanted to feed back my considerable experience from using the various products that Axelos produce, and then bring that back into the generation of future best practice guides for the benefit of end users. And as you can see from the slide, I've got risk program manager experience and project and program management experience as well. I'm often asked what does a product ambassador do, and the role is to basically is to come and talk to audiences, for example, like the BPUG user group. And I was quite fortunate to be at Utrecht earlier this month for a really great event where I presented Axelos ProPath, and we'll touch on that just slightly. But the other aspects of the role are thought leadership pieces, which servant leadership is part, and also review and update of current frameworks and methods that we currently have in our stable. So it's a very interesting role.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, well, glad to have you here. Just for the audience, if there are any questions during the chat, Allan will focus on the chat and the slides. I will be there. If there is a question, put it in the chat box. You find the chat box there, and I can ask the questions at a certain moment. So if you have a question, please feel free to enter it, and I'll try to find a moment to intervene and ask Allan to answer that specific question. And of course, I'll have some questions for you, maybe to respond as well. Yes, Allan.
Thank you very much for that, Ruud. So what do our products provide? And in essence, due to the presence of case studies and testimonials, this is where we endorse what our products do and help to transform businesses by helping them achieve their objectives and by developing the skills and the skills of their employees and the processes that they use as well. Secondly, the content is developed and distilled from real-world experience in developing practices, and collaboration is written through the heart of everything that we do. we engage with end users, and this is how we know how we can improve, make sure our products are the best products available. So in essence, they strive to produce best practice guides through robust reviews and updates with recognized subject matter experts. And for the end users themselves, through the generation of exams, this instills confidence in end users and empowers them to succeed. This is really important because until you've actually went through a best practice or Prince 2 or Prince 2 Agile course and got your practitioner certification at the end, you don't have that confidence to make the actual method work effectively for you. You can do it with foundation, but practitioner gives you that confidence. Anyway, that gives a quick overview why we basically develop our products. So
yeah, and it's basically also from us as the best practice user group, we discuss about how we can do projects, portfolios, programs better. And all this discussion helps in developing these best practices with you guys and making sure that we have exams to show that we are according to these expectations, meet these expectations, and can show to customers and people we work for that we have these skills available and keep them up to date.
Absolutely, that's a key point, Rud. Keeping it up to date, because that's what we endeavour to do, to keep the best practices up to date, because the guys and girls who are out there doing it for real in projects and programs, mean it's our obligation to give them the most up-to-date skills, because it's not an easy job, and but that's why it's such a challenging but absolutely fascinating job to be involved in as well.
Okay.
So moving on, this Halloween type slide describes projects. Projects can be scary since they bring about change and uncertain, and that's why they need good leaders, because people are usually they have a lot of they feel uncertain, they feel unsure, so they need a leader, and that's why leadership is one of the many skills that a project manager requires. There are lots more, but the projects are basically there and they need to be managed and led properly. And leading on to the next slide that we have is this was what was basically covered at the presentation in Utrecht at the BPUG event. And within the projects, within the programs, within the portfolios, or the MOR and the P3O certification, this is one area where leadership, instead of servant leadership, is important within our new Axelos ProPass certification scheme. And the green boxes are the boxes of note, and these are the paths to choose from: the ProPath Project Expert, ProPath Agile Project Expert, and Program Leader. And the ProPath Project Expert is based on Prince 2, Practitioner, MOR Practitioner, and MSP Practitioner. So you have a good grounding in risk, but more importantly, you see where projects link into in the organisation, into the MSP 5th edition network. Similarly, there's a similar structure which is covered by Prince 2 Agile Practitioner for those who seek to explore in more detail the adaptability and flexibility of Agile delivery. On the right-hand area is what we call the strategic route, which is the ProPath Program Leader. This comprises again of MSP 5th edition, MOP practitioner to basically give an overall view of the organisation from the portfolio perspective, and P3O from program management office perspective as well. Also within the project expert field, there's a great focus on MOR practitioner, because all projects are risky and there needs to be an expertise built up in this particular sector. So these are the new designations which have been put in place, and but it's important to know is that leadership in all these particular areas and designations is really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine it's one of the important parts of every job you do. Leadership, showing leadership. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anyway, let us move on and let's focus on the project area, because this is where we need to focus on today. And this is our this is one of my favorite diagrams from Prince 2 6th edition, and this shows you the which I think is a diluted slide. There could be more and more lozenges, which is the shapes at the edge of the circle, added to this, but we weren't allowed to because it was going to become too complicated. But with these different characteristics like line management, communication, user needs monitoring, teamwork, etc., and this is hugely important because it shows how line management and how servant leadership can tie in via line management with the various duties that the project manager undertakes. And there could be many more activities, but leadership is really, it basically encompasses all these particular characteristics, of which there are many.
Okay. Yeah.
So let us look into what makes a good leader. What makes a good leader? And after some research, we came up with this, that one of the many definitions. It's one of many, but I think sums up the qualities involved. At the top of the pile of books, you've got intelligent. They have to have the ability to know what they're doing. They have reached a senior position in the organization, which reflects this, because you've got to know what you're doing to basically be successful in an organization. Honest, they must be trustworthy, and not just with their peers, but with the project team reporting to them in a project context. Because if honesty is reduced, then the effect the actual respect the leader has with his team reduces as well.
Yeah.
Creative, they have the ability to contribute to and sometimes provide solutions to issues, but this needs to be done within reason, because you need to have a certain ability to basically empower and delegate and empower your team as well, and help the team out as well as possible.
Yeah. But Allan, I can imagine that, let's say, creativity is also a challenge, because if we have a leader who has too much creativity in a team which is not that creative, then he can basically, let's say, it's basically his idea, let's say, and I think he needs to be in line with the team, I guess, instead of bringing his own ideas only.
That's right, and I think, Ruud, what you have to do is have a balance. If your team's short on ideas and you've got lots, then you've got to maybe drip feed the ideas into the team, or basically get them to become creative, because groups of people become more creative. I mean, that's how you solve problems. And confident. They must have the respect of the for example, project board members and the teams reporting to them. They must take the responsibility for making decisions and sticking with them, even if they're the wrong decisions. That's the most important area. And they must have a confident aura about them, which teams can look up to and follow. And the more I think about what the industry that we are in, it's all about confidence. Giving the end user organizations the confidence that, hey, we know what we're doing. This is difficult, but we're going to do it because we believe we can do it.
Yeah.
One of the other aspects is driven. They must be the source of the drive and the guiding light for the project team. And this is particularly important even if the going gets tough. Leading a project team, of which I've led many, is really easy when the going is good. But you don't learn about yourself until you've done that when the going gets tough.
Yeah.
Courageous, they must be responsible and also, in certain instances, accountable for what they do. And they must be able to make tough decisions, and sometimes under immense time pressure, and stick with the decisions made and not go missing when the going gets tough. All in all, it's a very demanding position, and not one to take lightly.
Yeah, I can remember. Let's say we had the opening at the BPUG seminar of the Hans van Griensven, the sergeant or the colonel in the army, about the slag bij Tora, the fight at Tora, and it was the team behaved in line of, let's say, the strategy, the ambition, building this team, making sure that they know what they're up for, what they need to do. Was, yeah, let's say even if he wasn't there, or even if management is not there, the team knows the challenge and what they're up for, and they need to be saying, okay, if it's in line of this idea, we can do it. And that courageous part, I think that's fully understandable.
Yeah, absolutely. When we move on now to look at servant leadership, servant leadership sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it's a highly important approach that project managers should consider and adopt. It's important to note from the outset that Prince2 does not have a preferred style of leadership, because the way the Prince2 method has been developed, it can support any style, and this includes servant leadership as well. So, I mean, we mentioned it. We mentioned quite a lot of it in the organizational theme in Prince2 Agile, but this leadership type can also be used in Prince2 projects as well. So what's actually involved in this? What are the actual items of it as well? So empowerment, and this introduces the concept of we as a term, rather than the project manager seeing themselves as I. And I always use the note that it's important to remember that there is no I in team. And I always say that to myself at various kickoff meetings where I say there's no I in team, and it's important. Yeah. So having that sort of language and having that sort of approach to the team empowers the team as it puts the team members first, but at the same time taking into consideration the overall objectives of what's the purpose behind the project and why we're doing it. Yeah. And the phrase "we shall succeed together but fail individually" is hugely important. It sounds very, very something like Eisenhower would have said maybe before D-Day, but it's very important. You know, if the team works in silos, then it's not going to function. It's not going to succeed. But it's highly important because sometimes in this highly emotive and challenging environment of project management, the we gets overlooked. So it's up to the servant leader to ensure that everyone in the team is looked after. This in turn creates a happier, more effective and productive team. And as a result, performance improves accordingly. So they're all working together to get it done. So let's look at the project environment, which can be incredibly challenging. And depending on the projects that we have in place. And as stated in our Prince2 Agile guidance, it's important to focus on creating a project environment which the team can feel truly empowered and responsible for the way they work and the products and value they produce, even if the team manager and project manager is ultimately responsible. So the environment is really important. And for those of you who are familiar with Prince2 Agile, there's a really great tool called the Agilometer, which is basically a slider guide, as we call it. And what it does is it keeps an overall view, but independently of sliders, independent sliders of how well your organization is accepting Agile. But it can be tailored for any organization. Equally, the project environment in a Prince2 perspective or any project environment needs to be watched with care, because if it changes, then that can affect the methods going to be used. So let us look at some of the other aspects. You get empowerment, you get collaboration between teams, which is absolutely It's how we do it. We break down the culture. It's cross-fertilization of ideas across the silos, reducing the silos out of the organization. And when it's running well, it's really, really fantastic to be involved in it. So servant leadership requires a facilitative and collaborative culture. So as opposed to an authoritarian command and control style, which is still so often encountered. So the style of leadership promotes the use of agile business behaviors, but more importantly, the use of proper business behaviors, whereas collaboration is what I would say is a recognized business behavior, rather than just purely agile. Agile basically brought the approach of collaboration to light initially, but now it's becoming what businesses need to do. Because the great thing with projects is that they break down the silos within the organization. And I've always enjoyed that challenge, and also seeing the cross-fertilization of ideas. So, powerful business behaviors. So, what's the first one we want to look at? And the first one we want to look at is collaboration. And collaboration between teams. This involves a servant leader trusting the team to deliver, so that they're not getting in the way, checking up with them, allowing them to basically collaborate together to make sure progress is made, so that the team can get an honest view of where they're working together, and also insist that the customer has. This is when we're looking at an agile perspective, is that it involve the team in release planning, but also insist that the customer has cleared their diary to guarantee their involvement. For example, when I was running agile projects, it was 3 days a week. We need customer representation in the project so that you get that level of collaboration. But also within other, say, what we call it sequential linear development, you'll have collaboration between functional teams within, and also business analysis collaboration across them. It all depends where the actual work of the project is being placed. And a project involving agile methods, it needs to be based on effective collaboration. And this also includes the team's self-organization and solving issues together. And that leads to self-organization within teams, and this is how your team improves its efficiency and deals with issues, and basically how you do continuous lessons learned, how you improve your processes, but it's important to note that you got to trust your people who know best how to deliver the right solution, so that the right solution is delivered to the customer's requirements. But equally, it's important that the project board or the senior management is clear of what empowered means, so that the team members will be supported and will not be micromanaged or overruled or neglected. And that comes from the project board and the project manager having a balance. And that self-organization ties in nicely with manage of exception principle in Prince 2.
Yeah.
And self-organization, and this is one thing that I always found was a bit of a issue when I was using agile teams. Ensure that the project team is basically a stable team, so it can harness the most effective individuals themselves, and ensuring that the project team is aware and understands the role of the project leader is hugely important as well.
Yeah.
But for all this to work, teams need to be transparent and honest when working together. Deliver something that users can use and relate to quickly get the input from users to make sure they're on the right track. And you can only do this if you're transparent and upfront. And also from looking at stakeholders, that basically when we're doing the discovery phase or the requirements decomposition and gathering for the changing of business, that you give them, you basically say that some of their requirements will be dropped from the list. So that also involves being transparent and upfront into the stakeholders themselves. And communication. It's hugely important that the project manager needs to communicate where the project's going and how the progress is addressed to basically the various stakeholders. And it's getting the blend of communication through the use of various channels to improve effectiveness. And that's one of the balances that project manager basically needs to include. And ensures that the whole team, customers, suppliers, are involved in the process of defining and agreeing the project's vision and how the team's engaged and motivated from the start. But I have to say it's still one of the major challenges, and basically still as human beings, we love to talk, but we find it difficult to communicate, and that's going to be a continuing challenge going forward.
Yeah.
And finally is exploration, where you're looking at the team to, as we touched on it earlier, to explore and resolve issues and the feasibility of options and bring in innovation in the project delivery to increase rates of velocity and basically ensure that the team can basically learn the maximum amount of knowledge from, in an agile term, the minimum viable product, which basically shows how much they can learn from the minimum effort put in. But exploration is also good for the team because therefore you reduce the uncertainty from a technical and customer point of view, and also help to identify the areas that need to be looked at to further define the project, product description, etc. And various other areas as well. But these 5 are the really, really, really powerful business behaviors.
Yeah, and it's fun to see, Allan, that again in relation to the best practice seminar, the fight of Chora and the teams putting in the effort had all these elements in place, and this was a war zone and let's say a not so pleasant workplace, but let's say the resemblance is really big. So it's not in development software or doing construction or a bridge. It's in any team and in any type of project. These topics, come back.
Absolutely right, Ruben. And I think that this is where we've got to look at these particular there might be more behaviours, and this is what one of the reasons today to talk about this is to probably look at exploring more behaviours as well. But it's hugely important, and I think also from the event in Utrecht, it was that projects are about people and how people work together. So
for sure.
Other parts the servant leader needs to look at is removing the blockers to team progress. And this can be communication, bottlenecks with other teams, fault resolution times, documentation, and excessive processing. So they've got to remove blockers to team progress as well. Now, if we look at the aspect of the liaison with other departments, which is also an important aspect, servant leaders need to be able to liaise with other departments to remove external blockers. So they need to have excellent interpersonal and communication skills, because how you get on with people, if there's an issue, how do we get it done? How do we get it resolved? And this just doesn't keep the team efficient, but also increases the respect the team has for the project manager. If you prepare to go out on a limb to help them, they'll go out on a limb to help you. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And the value that the project managers, and this is an important point. If there's one important thing that we take away from today, it's this: that the value that project managers bring is not their position, but the fact that they make everyone better. That's the key to it. That's the key to it.
Yeah,
Your facilitation role, and that's what makes it happen. So let's look at these servant leadership skills in more detail. So team building, so key to success of the team, and coupled with unrelentless focus, you're able to take the people with you. I mean, that goes without saying. Communication skills. Projects are still failing as a result of this, and you can't give enough focus to this part of your job. In the 2019 PPM benchmark report that we did, this was at 35% failure rate for communication, communication being the issue.
Yeah. Being visible,
approachable at all times, and don't go missing when things turn tough. That's one of the huge things. If you go missing, they're wondering where you are, and then they obviously are looking for your support as well. Having a vision. So servant leaders need to be able to convey the future state of what we're doing, so that they can bring they can articulate the change, and so they can take the team with them and understand the future state and get them to buy into it. Coaching others to grow using the GROW model, which involves goal setting, realistic objectives, workarounds to coach team members as well. And driving energy. If you don't have this, why expect the team to work in this way as well? And a lot of project managers
I can fully understand it. You need to be enthusiastic, keep your head up, take the team on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fully understand.
Because if you don't have that, then they're not going to follow you. But one of the one of the other important ones to be really aware of is emotional intelligence, and this is a whole webinar itself, this one, but we just touch on it very briefly here. You need to be consistent with your behavior and be aware of how this could affect others, especially in this in this environment of projects and programs, because especially now, since we're now working remotely, because you can't tell how people's body language is changing because what you're saying to them. You've got to be hugely aware, because people can be scared. And confidence. This is what project management is all about, in my opinion. Leading the team with confidence and being self-aware of what you're doing and not getting flustered when things go wrong. Empathy. Understand what your people are going through and show them that they matter. And that's really, really an important aspect to look at as well. Planning, the ability to plan, so make sure you hold frequent, lessons learned or retrospectives after a particular phase of work to make sure everything's working fine, so that the team can buy into it and feed into the update and to improve the processes, but also improve trust and what they're doing, and their input's going to be respected. And in this aspect, servant leaders need to concentrate on the listening and listening and interpersonal skills, so that the dialogue is effective and any resulting changes are feasible. And servant leaders need to be project managers with complete integrity, because they've got to listen and then act on what they've heard. There's also the ability to monitor, touch base with everyone in the project every day, so that you know that they're happy. That's hugely important, and because it's really important to know a project team's happy with the way they're working in a project environment, and the project manager needs to become a facilitator in this. It generates trust and confidence among the team that as a project manager, you know what you're doing. You focus on removing problems, hindering the teams, you get the work done, you clear the debris, as I used to call it, and make it happen. The ability to control, how you control, like, for example, in an agile perspective, the amount of rework going forward, and also ensuring that the teams are not continually deferring the difficult work to later on. So what you want to do is you want to get the difficult stuff done as soon as possible once you know enough, because therefore you can control what the delivery is going to be as well. But there needs to be control so that you can basically plug this into the governance structure in your organization.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, in Prince2 Agile, we put quite a bit of focus on servant leadership, and it's in the organizational theme. In simple terms, the idea is that the best way to lead a team is to be a servant to the team. Therefore, as a leader, you put the team members' needs above yours. And it would be the servant leader to ensure that everyone is looked after, that they are okay, and they have what they need. This in turn creates a happier, more effective and productive team, and then performance improves accordingly. But the most important thing also is that the objectives of what you're doing are clear, agreed, and still relevant. And that's the most important thing. And you need to take care of the team, but you also need to take care of the objectives of what you're actually trying to achieve. So Agile and servant leadership focus on everyone in the team as a whole being responsible for how they work and what they produce. This is the guidelines within Agile itself, and some of it's touched in Agile Manifesto. And it's important to note that Prince2 does not have a preferred style of control and leadership, so it can support any style, and this includes servant leadership, and it's important to note that as well. And servant leadership will fit into any Prince2 Agile role where leadership skills are needed, but I'd actually say it would fit into any project role as well. And in particular, a project board, a project manager, and team manager roles as well. But there needs to be a certain line of definition within the roles themselves. So an example of this would be to clarify the difference between leadership and management. Leadership normally refers to such things as vision, direction, and the ability to inspire. Management's focuses on what to be done and the people doing the work. So there's an overlap between these two, as leaders sometimes manage people, and managers always need to lead in some form. So there can be overlap between what is being done. So it's also the servant leader is creating a culture where people are comfortable to ask for help. And when they do, it is welcomed. And it's a significant part of creating the right environment. It's hugely important.
Yeah, feeling safe. Yeah,
it's all about, the psychological safety route, so that basically what you've got there is you don't feel like you're going to be punished by saying, I don't know this, so I can't ask that particular question. So that's one thing that in projects where if you've got a problem, you need to basically shout first. So, yeah. But the context is important, and we have to note that here. Servant leadership is a very powerful concept, and how far to utilize this depends on many factors. One such factor depends on the context which is being used. How open is a team, department, organization to the style of working? In mature agile organizations, they would use servant leadership and self-organization a lot. Another factor that could limit servant leadership is that a project team is temporary and therefore needs time to grow and bond, whereas an existing BAU team that is stable and has been together for a long period may have evolved its own way of working, which can happen to be self-exploration and servant leadership. But ultimately, Prince2 can support as much as little of this style of working as desired, because it's no preferred style. It's important to note there's nothing in Prince2 that limits this. So if you're working on a Prince2 or a Prince2 Agile project as a PM, you can use this sort of technique. So let's touch on briefly about what's happened in the last 2 years, and it's interesting to note that I've done so many webinars since 2019, but my first face-to-face event was in Utrecht 2 weeks ago, and that was my first face-to-face event in 2 years. So
yeah,
change days. So what are organizations doing and how are they reacting to it? So what we're doing, we're all having a journey back to a new normal. And the organizations have to do this, they basically have got to reset. And at the outset of the global crisis, organizations leaders were forced to take swift and decisive action, slamming on the brake, so to speak, and then basically looking at the survival of the organizations and the safety of employees. And now quite a lot of organizations have moved beyond that phase, and some have, the ones who have adapted have become more successful. But after reset, what happens now and what organizations are having to do is refocus. And this new term, this new context-based term, refocus, with the right mindset can bring a whole host of opportunities. And that's all about mindset for organizations, whereby rather than looking at risks as bad things, for example, seek the opportunities that risks offer as a change of mindset. So visionary CEOs within organizations have started to reimagine their organizations and basically change the mindset, and also protecting their core business and begin to reimagine the future. So this is what. So let's look at what this refocus means in more detail. So refocus involves putting power in the hands of your people, and what I mean by that is that to do this successfully, executives must be willing to devolve leadership responsibility to teams. I'm not here saying it's anarchy, delegation, or to everyone further down the train, to provide advisory input, and also getting the information from the people who know most, which is usually people at the sharp end of the organization, and getting their information to help with the decisions being made. So it's distributing leadership responsibility will enable top teams to face current challenges head on, while steadying the ship to lever the future opportunities. And leaders should also encourage experimentation within parameters, and also basically looking at where organizations need to be going. Preparing for future skills. During refocus, leaders would be wise to lean on the support of their HR and development teams to identify and begin developing the capabilities that organizations will need to future opportunities and new ways of working. For example, an example of that would be the Axelos ProPath products as well. And these capabilities will evolve and will be basically dictated by shifting organizational context. Taking a people-centric approach from an employee perspective, leaders should ensure that they are regularly communicating with their employees and providing ways to test the emotional pulse of the organization. So regular but succinct well-being surveys are a useful source of data for this. Also are regular town halls as well. And providing transparent, unambiguous and factual updates about the business, including what's known and unknown, how the business is performing and when employees might return to office, will be welcomed by its employees. And the organisations that have done that and have had that transparency are still remaining competitive. So you're looking at striking a delicate balance between vulnerability and optimism while aligning people to what the organisation is going in the future. And the leaders must continue to provide support to the people. And we find that the organisations and the leaders who have continued their support during the COVID pandemic have been able to recover quickly. And this is where the leaders themselves need emotional intelligence is needed in abundance. And a lack of it is likely to be career limiting because they need to know how they're interacting with their people. hugely important. And make no mistake, the way employees are treated have been treated during the pandemic will come to either define or haunt leaders across all organizational contexts in years to come. Some organizations might not make it as a result of that. I'd like to share with you now a little video about an example of one person who I feel was one of the best examples of servant leadership in his day, and and this came from when he said that one voice can make all the difference. So I just want to show you just for a couple of minutes.
Your voice makes a difference. And if you don't believe that, I want to leave you with one last story. When I ran for the presidency in 2008, I fly down to South Carolina. Alarm goes off, and I feel terrible. I am exhausted. Think I'm coming down with a cold. I open up the curtains. It's pouring down rain outside. Pouring down rain, horrible day. I get the newspaper outside my door, and there's a bad story about me in the New York Times. I get dressed, shave, walk out. My umbrella blows open. That ever happened to you? And I get soaked. I'm just soaked. I get in the car. I say, all right, how long is it going to take to Greenwood? An hour and a half. Finally, I get out and I walk in, and there are like 15, 20 people there. And I will tell you, they didn't look any happier to see me than I did to see them. And so I go around the room and I say, how do you do? What do you do? But they're not really feeling it right now. And suddenly I hear this voice from the back just shout, fired up. And everybody in the room says, fired up. And then I hear the voice say, ready to go. And everybody in the room says, ready to go. And I don't know what's going on. I think these people are crazy. Maybe I shouldn't have come here. And then I look in the back of the room, and there's this middle-aged woman. She's got a big church hat, and she got, I think, a gold tooth. Turns out she holds a position in the local NAACP office, and also, I'm not kidding you, is a private detective. This is a true story. She's like she's like a private eye. Although it's hard to think that you wouldn't see her coming. She's very colorful. And she is known wherever she goes by saying this chant, fired up, ready to go. And every meeting she goes to, she does this thing. But the interesting thing is, after a while, I'm starting to get kind of fired up. I'm starting to feel like I'm ready to go. And all those negative thoughts and all those bad memories start kind of drifting away. And it just goes to show you how one voice can change a room. And if it can change a room, it can change a city. And if it can change a city, it can change a state. And if it can change a state, it can change a nation. And if it can change a nation, it can change the world. So I just have one question for you. Are you fired up? Ready to go? Fired up? Ready to go? Fired up? Ready to go?
Just to wrap up, is that from my experience, servant leadership is a very powerful project management tool, and Prince2 can support that style of working as much as possible. There is nothing in Prince2 that limit, or any particular project management method, to be honest, that limits using a variety of leadership styles. But in particular, Prince2, because it has that flexible and generic nature, there's nothing in it in Prince2 that limits using a variety of leadership styles as well. And as discussed, servant leadership will help organizations on their continued journey to a new normal. Yeah. And so that's thank you, and questions, please.
Yeah, I'll ask it in the chat as well. A question, let's say, which I have, let's say, what skills did you grew in these 20 years of experience? What is something which, let's say, in leadership styles, well, where you grew, which is an interesting one from a personal perspective?
One I've done myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually basically thought with projects that people needed to be, you know, looked after in projects, because they were usually, you know, I've never been on a project which is a nice to do. You never get that option. It's like we need it within a 6 month, 18-month window, and this is the team. And you always get this, this is the team, and the team ain't going to change. And the other thing that's quite interesting is that if you're the rookie project manager as well, you tend to get more. You believe initially that the operational people are giving you their best people. They don't. Their best people are the people that basically work with them continually, and they're BAU, and that's it. And so you have a lot of people issues as well, which you have to manage. So the best way I found out is basically this is where there's no I in team, you know, and also have, for example, I mean, Prince 2 is my background for projects, and what I loved about it was simple. It was simple and it's process based, and what it does is I always found very quickly that they had to take the emotion out of the project, because these things are flying about there, you know, and people want to do stuff right away, but you say, no, that's not the right stuff. This is how we're going to do it. And so at project kickoff meetings, I would basically take them through, this is how we're going to deliver this stuff. And this is your role, this is my role, and we're going to do it as a team. And then you quote the Ike Eisenhower, we'll succeed as a team and fail as individuals. You know, and so it's and these are the sort of rules, and this is, and you know, you have that, you know, I particularly like the PMI charter, because I'm a PMI member as well. And the charter is a visual aid. You know, this is what you're going to do, and this is what people can do to it, and that's been expanded into information radiators and agile as well. So, but taking the team with you, hugely important, but also being, you know, planning for these meetings, you know, plan, you know, for example.
Well prepared.
Well prepared. I mean, have the meeting rooms, you know, there's nothing worse than projects, and, you know, it's very, I mean, you don't have the actual effectiveness that, you know, you can have a project board, project room meeting. You basically need to have a meeting, book meetings so people can have a good experience, etc. And the technology, because we're all using Teams now and stuff like that. And if the technology goes down, it goes down, you know, and we work on, you know, but bringing them I always put a great emphasis on startup, but not just the startup of what the project is, but starting up with the people, making sure the people gel together.
Yeah, sounds good. I must admit, let's say with the colonel at the opening speech of the BPUG seminar, let's say that story that the team knows where we're heading for. That was one of the most powerful for me to hear. Let's say, okay, if let's say the highest empowerment in the Netherlands is not available, he can act based on this strategy they developed, and they can handle within this strategy and make decisions. And even if management is not there, the team can handle based on, okay, this was our strategy, we discussed about this. If we want to do something, it needs to meet that strategic focus we had, and if it fits, we can do it. And of course, he explained that, let's say, he was there to present, so he made it. Of course, there's always this courageous part. He took a step and said, we're going to do this. We're going to make sure that we defend the city of Chora within the limits we got. And I must say, let's say that feeling of personal, let's say the team is a personal team which closely works together is even more important in a war zone, I can imagine. This feeling that we're in this as a team and work as a team was is really important. I must admit, let's say learning that at my side, it's also interesting. How do you work together in a team and make sure that everybody is heard and taken care of?
Yeah, and the most important things, these are like fundamental behaviors that as a project manager you need to start to understand, you know, and as you follow the different parts of your career, because I've actually read some research that everyone's job is changing every 4 years, you know, because I think that's heavily skewed on millennials though, who tend to say it's 4 years time to change my job. But you get different roles come up, because if you're doing projects and you then basically then go and do programs, then what you have is you've got a major challenge, because programs are far more demanding than projects. So these skills need to be enhanced accordingly. And just to give you make you aware, is that we're working with our publisher TSO on a book about we call them core skills for project and program managers, because what we've got to make the people who are not aware of this, who are starting out in their careers, they need to be aware of what they need to do. I mean, learning a method and learning a framework is one thing, but doing it repeatedly, you know, from one project and program to the next and getting results, etc., then that's a whole different kettle of fish.